So let's talk about Ready Player One and virtual identity. So before I get into this, I want to say that I did enjoy reading this book. There's the rollicking adventure and there's a lot of fun parts, but holy shit, does it had some problems. So first of all, let's talk about the audience for this book. It reads and feels like young adult fiction. The protagonist is a high school kid, dystopian future setting, corny love interest, all like the terrible tropes are there. But at the same time, it's packed with 80s like trivia and interesting stuff and culture, which I feel like the audience for 80s nostalgia and young adult fiction are two very different groups. In like the same way, it also gets really heavily into like video game culture and trivia and reference and like all that classic stuff. But at the same time, it feels the need to explain stuff that that audience would already know about, like HP and XP and leet speak. Side note, it also felt the need to use XPs instead of XP the whole time, which really bugged me. So aside from the problems with shifting tone, the big problems with Ready Player One is in its characterization. All of the characters are paper-thin stereotypes. And I have to believe that this is somehow a meta-reference to, like, nerd culture and, like, online culture. Because without that sort of, like, haha, this is all a joke on you, everything just sort of falls apart and it all sucks. So the main character is a boy named Percival, or Parzival, however you want to pronounce it. He might as well be named Fuckboy McWhitebread. All of the terrible, like, tropes you could imagine about young adult fiction male protagonists are there. He saves the day because he's special and different, and he knows things that no one else does, and he thinks differently than everyone else. And he just, generally speaking, interacts with the world in a way that an 18-year-old wouldn't. Artemis is the love interest. She is introduced by way of Percival's sort of stalking of her. She runs a blog, and he sort of admits that he's been following her for years. And the first time they meet in the game, he like freaks out, and the only thing he can talk about is how cute she is and how beautiful she is, and he like instantly wants to propose to her. So she pretty much instantly fulfills the manic pixie dream girl trope, and it doesn't get better for her the whole book. She exists to make Percival look good and to be pined after. H, on the other hand, is the male friend, and he has two problems. So issue number one with H in the virtual world is gatekeeping. One of the accusations that's commonly leveled against nerd culture is that there are a certain group of people, most often men, who decide that people who don't enjoy this material as much as they do, or don't know about as much as the material as they do, aren't real fans. And this whole process of redefining the goalpost and deciding who gets to be a fan and who doesn't, who gets to be part of the culture and community and who doesn't, is known as gatekeeping. And it's a really big problem in nerd culture and online culture and just sort of all of that world today. And it's exactly what H does the whole book. The first time we meet him, he and Percival make a game out of making fun of this other dude who doesn't know as much as they do about this weirdly obscure game. And then the rest of the book, he exists to reaffirm Percival's in status with this group, because he just knows so much, and it's constantly like, good reference bro, fist bump. The other problem with H is the really big one, and it's what I want to spend the most time on, and it has to do with identity in virtual spaces. Bit of a spoiler here, but it has nothing to do with the plot. So, towards the end of the book, all the main characters are starting to meet up in real life, and it's revealed that H, instead of being a white boy, is a large black lesbian woman named Helen. So I'm going to pause to take a side rant here and talk about Helen. Her revelation and realization to Percival in no way recontextualizes her character's previous actions. To a large degree, it feels like baiting for all the groups that she's supposed to represent. And while I don't want to discount the importance of representation for all the groups that she represents, especially in a teenage book, this just feels like the flimsiest, thinnest possible representation for those groups. So H mentions how she's always used white male avatars online, and how her mother actually suggested this to her when she was first signing up on the internet for things. So this is the big problem. This is virtual identities and the question that we need to ask. In virtual worlds, when it's possible for someone to change or hide part of their identity for an advantage, should they? By pretending to be an athletic, heterosexual white male, H is giving up a large part of her personal identity, and should she be forced to make that choice? I absolutely believe the answer to that question is no, but the only way to change our cultural perceptions around this is to change how we think about homosexuality and race and gender. If we don't fix these problems now, they will follow us into the future and into virtual worlds, and to a large degree, they already have. I'm going to link to some stuff in The Thing, but I highly recommend you check out Folding Ideas' video on Gamergate. He has a really cool discussion about online culture in that video, And he really raises an interesting idea about anonymity online and how you aren't truly anonymous, even without revealing anything about yourself. People are still making assumptions about you, and you aren't nothing. You aren't something that someone has made no assumptions about. You are their default person. It's also a really cool book called Ranting Out Loud by Nicholas Belardes. I'll link to it on Amazon and The Thing. It's a series of short essays on pop culture, and if you're looking for someone who isn't white, I suggest checking that out. He's really cool. He's an American author with Latino heritage, so I really suggest that. It's a really fun read. Besides just that chapter, there's some really cool stuff about Game of Thrones and a bunch of other pop culture things. And finally, I want to point out the white elephant in the room, which is me. I represent almost none of the minorities that H does. And I'm acutely aware of this, and because of that, I am by no means an authority on what those groups are going through. So I welcome anyone from those groups to please reply to this and share your experience about virtual identity.